In this video, we will learn how to interact with Amazon Web Services account from the terminal. We will also experiment with bash functions to be able to switch between different user profiles. To get started, please open the AWS Management Console. Navigate to the IAM service. Go to the user section and then select our test user. This is the status page, and it appears that the last console login for this user was 2 days ago. But looking at the access key status, it seems like we have never used it. Let's change that. Open Ubuntu subsystem in our Windows terminal. And now we need to configure AWS CLI. Type in AWS configure and then use the access and secret keys that we saved in the previous lessons. First enter the access key, then secret key, for default region I'll put US East 1, and for default format I will use JSON. Alright, type the next command, AWS S3 ls. It basically lists all the available S3 buckets. In our case it has run successfully, but we do not have any S3 bucket yet. Another command that we can execute is AWS STS getCaller identity, which displays identity, or in other words user, that we are logged in under right now. You can see that we use test user, and now we can also check if its status in AWS console has changed. Refresh the page, and apparently it has not changed. Alright, let's try to create a S3 bucket. To do that, type AWS S3 MB, which stands for make bucket, then S3 : and then the name of the bucket. Keep in mind that the name of the bucket should be unique globally, otherwise you will get an error. So I'll put a random name, there is no errors, which is good. Now type in AWS S3 ls, and here you can see the bucket we've created. Let's get back to the AWS console, and you can see that the access key was used today. That's great, we just used IAM user from the AWS CLI. Now let's create second user. I will call it test user 2. And attach the same policies that we did for the first one, which is administrator access managed policy, and then click next. And then create user. The user is created. Now open its page, go to security credentials section and click create an access key. Select command line interface, tick the last option and click next. Tagging is optional, please skip it. And let's save newly created access and secret keys. As you can see, this user has only the access keys. It does not have console access, as we do not need it. We created it to test some other things. Now let's see how we can use the user from the terminal. There is a concept of profiles in AWS CLI, which allows to use different users. To create a new one, type AWS configure profile and then the name of the profile. I will call it user2. Then enter access and secret keys of the second user. The default region keeps the same, US East 1, and the format is JSON. So we configured another profile. But how we can start using it? Let's check which identity we are using at the moment. As you remember, we type AWS STS getCaller identity command for that. And you can see that we are still using an old user. To change that, we need to set up an AWS profile environment variable. Let's see if we have it already. Type echo AWS profile. We use $symbol when we want to reference a variable. The output is empty, so it does not exist. Let's type export AWS profile user2 to apply user2 profile that we've just created. Now echo this variable again. And it has value of user2. If we check the identity, you can see that now we are using test user2. So basically we switched from the test user to test user2. But how do we get back to the test user profile? Actually, when we configured AWS CLI initially, we didn't specify any profile, and it automatically created profile name default. Let's type export AWS profile default and check identity again. As you can see, we're back to the test user. That's good, but as you can imagine, it is not very convenient to switch between profiles typing the full export command every time. And we can simplify that by using bash functions. Let's open Sublime Text, open bash rc file, scroll to the bottom, and let's create a couple of functions. I will call first function as default, and add export AWS profile default command into it. The second function will be called user2, and I will add export AWS profile user2 command, as you already guessed. Let's save the file and get back to our terminal. Now we can call these functions directly from the terminal, instead of exporting AWS profile variable. Let's try that. Type user2. And as you can see, Ubuntu cannot find this command. Actually, in order to apply the changes that we added to bash rc file, we need to type source command and then the name of the file. Basically, source command executes all commands from a shell script file and applies them to the shell where it's being executed. Now retype user2, and here we go. It seems that Ubuntu understood the command this time. Let's check the identity, and you can see that we are logged in under a test user2 now. Let's switch to the default profile by calling function called default. It is successful, and now we are logged in under the test user. Perfect! We managed to create functions to simplify switching between different users or different profiles of AWS CLI. We can check all the existing profiles in the credentials file of AWS CLI. This file resides in .aws directory. Here you can see both profiles and respective access and secret keys. If you compare them, you will see that those are actually the ones that we were using during AWS CLI profiles configuration. By the way, this file is not the only place where we can check available profiles. We can also do it by running AWS configure list profiles command. Here you can see the same profiles that we saw in the file. And that's it. We successfully achieved what we planned. We configured AWS CLI with a couple of profiles, we were able to interact with AWS services from the terminal, and we created functions to simplify the switching between different user profiles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.